Welcome to Talking Jazz. My guest today is Jake Hertzog, and we're going to talk about a brand new guitar trio album that he recorded and much more. So, welcome, Jake.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And, I've known you in various ways and various connections, but I usually ask my guests at the beginning to just give us a quick synopsis of who's Jake, the jazz musician? How did you get bit by the jazz bug, and how did you get to pick the guitar and do what you do?
I've always sort of considered myself a guitarist that loves different kinds of music. The way I fell in love with jazz, I remember I started off sort of playing classical guitar as a kid and got into rock and roll very quickly because in my family the record player had things like Bruce Springsteen on it. When I went to see some jazz concerts, it sort of dawned on me at one point taking a lesson that, oh, I can play anything I want. So the pursuit of the freedom of improvisation was what drew me into jazz. And then, like many folks who get bitten by that jazz bug, I went through the route of various formal and informal training and have just been exceedingly lucky to cross paths with or study with or play with or run into a bunch of incredible musicians. And that I feel like that luck is still going.
That's a great thing. And you spent quite a bit of time in New York too, right?
Yeah, I spent about 10 years in New York, and I worked both in the pop circles as side performer and producer, songwriter, and I also worked in the jazz circles, somewhere in the fusion to left of fusion realm. I had some wonderful experiences. I had a band with the great drummer Victor Jones and the great bass player Harvey S. And we did 5 records together of my music. And Victor Jones was a very influential person for me because I was played in his band for a while. And so that was the sort of pocket that I was in when I was in New York. But I got to do some other sideways type things, working with Barry Outchell and some of his electric music. And I had a wonderful experience there because I could play pop on Saturday and the 55 bar on Tuesday or Monday. For me, it was a real treat to play in different styles. And I've continued that and brought some of that philosophy into my work as an educator too.
That's amazing. That's quite a bandwidth, and obviously that's how you can make it work if you're versatile and put it together. But on this new album, it's very much modern kind of jazz, and the first one we're going to listen to is Longing to Meet You. Do you want to give us a little backdrop before we go ahead and listen to that one?
So this whole record is another experiment in literalism in music. And I've done a few projects like that, one on particle physics and one on landscapes. And this one to me was a very much a return to the roots of what kind of got me into this music, back and making a kind of contemporary jazz record after having done some more classical or left field type projects. The literalism on this album is really just the complex emotional journey that led me at this point in my life to become a parent, what that was like for us as a couple with me and my wife. And so we went through a sequence of IVF to bring our daughter into the world. And that was a very, very complex emotional journey. And so I felt like all the music that I wrote during that period at some level was linked together. This track, Longing to Meet You, is very much takes some of those literal elements, mixed meter and odd phrasing and strange spacing of the melody, and this sort of looking for something, but also being very unsure. I think the theme of uncertainty is something that runs through a lot of these tracks.
That's very cool. So let's have a listen and listen with that in mind, and I'll ask you about the allegorical stuff a little bit more later. But here is Longing to Meet You from the brand new album by my guest today, Jack Herzog. And remind me of the album name, I didn't write it down.
The album name is also Longing to Meet You. So this is the
That's what
title
I
track.
thought, Longing to Meet You. So here is the title track to the new album with my guest today, Jake Herzog on guitar. track of the new album, Longing to Meet You, by my guest today, Jake Hertzog, who is leading the guitar trio that you heard. We got to know Jake a little bit, and you hinted a little bit to allegorical. Can you explain to us one more time what you mean with that? How do you make music with that?
It's a great question, and I love this question because there's so much programmatic Western music in a sense, and so as an improvising musician, you have to contend with that rich history of everything from operas to third stream jazz to free jazz, all the things that are kind of what is programmatic music. For me on this project, there were a couple of characters that I played with throughout the songs. One of them is just whether or not the songs have chord changes. And so as you go through the album in a linear way, a lot of the harmony sort of disappears for a while and then comes back kind of at the end. And for me, that was sort of a representation of kind of the way you feel when like the bottom drops out of your life and you feel lost in a way. And in jazz, we're used to something like harmony and form as a guide. And so removing those guides to me was a very literal expression of how we felt during that time. And I think one important thing to say is that in a process like this, IVF or anything similar, any couple or indeed any person that deals with or that experiences infertility, all those journeys are unique and they're all different and they're all very personal. But I do think there are very deep human emotions that unite all of those journeys, and certainly things like uncertainty and loss and disappointment and frustration. I think those are kind of very broad human emotions that people experience when they experience something like this. So to me, the pulling in and out of the harmony or pulling in and out of the form or pulling in and out of traditional musical technical guideposts was an expression of like, what can we subtract? How can we make the music or the listener feel like confused or uncertain or what's going on?
And I love that comparison. Yes, you have musical elements where you can express certain feelings, but the cool thing about music is that it gives us that language that goes beyond. So it's not an equal comparison. It's like, yep, we can agree that this makes you feel like it, but only music can do that, and we cannot put it in words exactly how that feels like. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Sometimes it is. I mean, that's one thing I really love about playing instrumental music too. I mean, I've got to play a lot of vocal music, but I think playing instrumental music gives you spaces between words. It gives you spaces between things that we have language for, and so to have this sort of parallel dimension of how to share a thought, I think is amazing.
Well, that's why we all caught this jazz bug.
That's
So
right.
the next tune, it's called a Dream Fades Slowly. So give us a glimpse what you were capturing in that one.
With this one, I wanted this sort of song to start rather organized and begin like as if it sounded like modern jazz, and then kind of gently fall apart. The saxophone solo and stuff is sort of like, okay, I can imagine that's what's coming, but then the guitar solo just kind of fades out and dies a little bit. And that was one thing we talked about a lot on the recording, is how does the soloist on the guitar and the soloist on the saxophone relate to each other. And sometimes they sort of take one solo together, and sometimes they take pair of opposites, because that's a classic thing in jazz education, right? Don't play the same solo as the other person did. And so in the context of trying to be intentional with it, that's what we did on this song, is this kind of just gently like deconstruct a little bit, and that we lose the form, lose the harmony, and just like this kind of lose the dynamics. And at some point, like, oh, are we still going? What happened?
That's very cool. That's a cool description. And I just realized I kept saying guitar trio, but this is actually a combo, a quartet. So before we go into it, you want to tell us real quick your fellow musicians that are playing on there?
The saxophonist is an incredible player named Matt Warshall. Bass player is a dear friend, amazing musician, Perrin Grace, and the incredible Joe Perry on drums.
And here is a Dream Fades Slowly from the new album Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Hertzog. the track entitled A Dream Fades Slowly, and this is a selection from the new album Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Hertzog, who you also heard on guitar. We already talked a little bit about the album, about the expression, but you also mentioned that this is part of a trilogy of other albums coming out, and some of the support you found with the Jazz Road Creative Residency, with Folk Music Fund, the Ozark Folk Music Fund, and the Artist 360 grant. And that's pretty amazing to have that together. Tell us a little bit about these funding opportunities and the options and possibilities something like that provides, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. So we live in an amazing age in the music business, and there's two things that are amazing about it. The first is that music creators can get their work heard all over the world by anybody immediately. I mean, that's an incredible paradigm shift that we're first generation of musicians to have. But the second one is that there's a lot of opportunities out there for creators to receive support for different projects. So some of those are traditional music industry, like you get a record deal, and that is often still the most traditional thing that musicians experience. But I have been fortunate in the past many months to work with some philanthropic organizations for this. And there are many philanthropic organizations that are devoted to the arts, and I think they're a crucial part of our general arts ecosystem nationally in the United States. And the best thing that creators, not just jazz musicians, but anybody who's a creator in any medium, can do is to kind of step up to the plate and apply for funding opportunities for grants, be they, I mean, we have a whole lattice work of everything from National Endowment for the Arts at the national level to regional arts organizations and then private foundations. So we do live in an incredible age of that kind of support. Certainly feel exceptionally lucky to have received some of that lately from South Arts and from Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, Mellon Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts in my research life. But I think this upcoming project, so this album is a quartet album, and next year I'm putting out a jazz philharmonic album that's full big band and strings, and it's a concerto for jazz guitar and jazz philharmonic. And I'm very excited about that because, especially as a guitar player, it's a rare opportunity to lead a large ensemble. Large ensemble work tends to be logistically complex and oftentimes expensive. So hence the need for funding of some nature to make those kinds of projects happen. So I'm just extremely fortunate to have been able to do that project. And we finished recording it last month. We did a debut of the performance a couple weeks ago, and it will come out in probably about a year from now. And that's just been a wonderful experience as well.
That's amazing. And I love the way you put it as an opportunity. Most are going, oh, it's so hard these days to make music. And you're going, oh, we have these opportunities. And that's the way to move forward and look out and find things. All right. So we're going to listen to another track from the album. This one is called Loss. And you always had some backdrop for us. Give us the meaning and the allegory behind this one.
This piece is very special to me because it represents the middle of our journey, which was loss and lost together. Musically, this is the peak of the metaphor because there's no harmony, no rhythm, no form. It's all of those elements are gone. Writing this kind of music was new to me when I first started. I get to throw a mentorship story in here. I was lucky to study with Phil Markowitz and Dave Liebman at the Manhattan School, and they are very interested in contemporary chromatic music and the threads from modern classical composers that translated into jazz. So during my time studying with them, I wrote all sorts of, I would consider, pretty out chromatic music. Some of that it eventually became the duo guitar album that I did a few years ago, but then a lot of it was just sitting around. And so this is a bit of an adaptation of a piece I wrote long ago, working with those great teachers. It's really just the simplest, like most meandering, complete absence of everything kind of piece. And you'll hear a little bit of in the background of the guitar. I'm using a neat granular synthesizer that's a relatively new, cool thing that can be put into a guitar pedal now. And so you'll definitely hear some of that in there.
Very cool. All right, let's listen to Loss from the album Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Hertzog, who you'll also hear on guitar. That was a track entitled Loss from the new album Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Hertzog. We've been talking about the music, we've been talking about your background. We should point out that you're in Arkansas, I believe. You are an educator, you are a researcher, you just wrote a concerto. That's a lot of different hats to wear, that takes a lot of balancing. And we talked about that because I do that a lot too. Do you have a secret to the balance or anything to advise on that?
I'm certainly lucky to be in a position where I get to do all those things as a performing musician that then came slightly later in life to doing research and writing and publishing that would be more traditional academic kind of research. I found that, I sort of, just like with jazz, you have to fall in love with the topics, and a method is like playing a scale. You do what, you have to play a scale to play a song, and you have to learn statistical analysis to do a research project, but that's it is what it is. I think one comment that I think always stands out from the various educators I talk to is that everybody sort of has a different balance that makes them happy, and so folks that love to be on a stage should be on a stage, and folks that love to be sometimes on a stage, sometimes in a classroom, sometimes in a lab, then should kind of pursue all of those things. And for me, I'm sort of fortunate but also I like doing a lot of things. So if I think if I was limited to only one of those things, I would feel like I was missing something. And so for me, playing the music and practicing music and teaching music is one side of a coin, and looking at the research questions I care about, which are almost all related to the general love of music and jazz and music education. I think for me that gives me a little avenue to what I hope is sort of giving back, and what can I uncover, what can I share, what can I try to help influence that would be positive for the future of this art form that I care about, and the future of the way we teach this art form is what I care about.
I so agree. It all feeds into each other, and you draw inspiration from gathering knowledge here, seeing your students learn, and creating music. And I work the same way. If I would be on a one-way track, I think that would not get me very far. So I need to get the input from various senses. So agreed. Unfortunately, sometimes people have to put you in buckets and say what you do now, but the explanation is I'm a musician, and here we create and put it all together. So the
Yeah, I
last,
think it's
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I think it's more and more common I see for performers to also engage in research, which I think is exceptional, and it's important that researchers engage in performance, and it just builds another sort of thought community about not just the art, but what are all the things that we do to not only push the art form, but push the way that we experience it, the way we present it, the way we share it, and that all, well, I hope, leads to a deeper and healthier jazz ecosystem everywhere.
I agree, and it gives us a stronger communication and more depth to everything. So the last time, what do we expect? How should we listen?
This one is really a song that expresses, in a word, some desperation. So as often happens with this kind of a process, and again, every couple, every individual who experiences infertility goes through a different journey. But at some point, there is a final attempt to make something happen, and I think that emotionally that is often a very fraught experience, because there is some in the back of your head, you know that if this fails, then something in your life is going to change. And so this song definitely draws from my rock influences and my rock and roll life a bit. Kind of also draws a bit from that fusion pedal point chromatic playing universe. The sense of the song is one of trying to reach very hard, and you have to be a little bit fearless going into this process, and also playing music with no rules, you have to be a little bit fearless to do it. So this is another one where we're sort of starting with something kind of organized, but then just letting it go, and the bumpers on the bowling alley just like disappear, and then the band is left going, okay, now what? And that's always a musical feeling I enjoy, right at the edge of organization.
I love that comparison of the bowling alley going going open and you don't have the rails anymore. So yeah, this is quite a display of virtuosity here too. Watch the guitar shredding that's coming at you. So let's have a listen. The Last Time, from the album Longing to Meet You, by my guest today, Jake Hertzog. track entitled The Last Time from a new album entitled Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Herzog. We will have time for two more where we're going to listen to Whisper You, and of course at the end, The Arrival, which is hopefully the goal of the whole album. But how old is that little girl now, and how did your life change? Tell us a little bit what happened in the meantime.
We've been so fortunate, Monica. I'm very happy to share with the audience that our journey did have a happy ending, and our daughter is a little bit more than 2.5 now. So she's doing all the wonderful things that 2.5-year-olds do, like running around and talking, and loves music, loves being outside, loves birds. Just wonderful, wonderful experience. Back to that idea of balance, as any parent from any walk of life knows, there's a whole equation that changes your thinking in terms of how you structure your life and how you structure your working life. And I'm very fortunate to have my wife being amazing as well. And so between the two of us, we've been just so happy with our experience as parents, and feeling grateful and fortunate every day for it. And also, I certainly think that going through an experience like this leaves imprint on the parent's philosophy and approach to even simple things like making sure that we can spend as much time together as possible. So we're certainly feeling very fortunate about that, and having these outlets like music to express our journey, I think has also been a beautiful thing.
It's certainly a gift, and you learn to appreciate that gift even more if it takes a long time to get that gift. My baby gift just graduated from IU, so that's another part of the journey where you're going, okay, I did what I could do. Now you go fly and change the world.
That's beautiful.
But Whisper You, so give us how to listen to what we can expect on this one.
This song for me sort of represents the moment that we found out that my wife was pregnant. It was about like maybe, having to kind of turn on a dime from looking at a process that may have failed to looking at a process that succeeded, wanting it so badly that you're almost afraid to say it out loud. Like, you're almost afraid that if you say, oh my gosh, it worked, then, like, did it work though? And of course, as any parent may certainly recalls, the beginning stages of any pregnancy are very fraught, and that again is different for every person who experiences it. But emotionally, it can be a very, very happy and a joyful, but also a tense time. To me, this song sort of is a little bit about that part of the journey. And musically speaking, there's a big guitar solo in the song, but I really wanted to write a nice melody for Matt. I think he's such great at delivering a melody, and most of the melodies on this record we kind of play together in like a traditional contemporary jazz way. And this one draws more from like folk music, and I feel like the saxophone's the lead singer, and I'm the guitar player strumming along, which gives him the ability to kind of do whatever he wanted with this. And so for me, this again draws from that kind of folk rock influence in my life.
Very cool. Here is Whisper You from the new album Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Herzog. Longing to Meet You by my guest today, Jake Hertzog. So we're coming to the final big moment, the arrival and putting it together. We already heard about the happy ending of the journey. And you talked a little bit also about your upcoming project and the concerto. Are there going to be some release parties for this album, or what's all the next stuff coming up for you? And where should people go for it?
Well, the easiest place to my work are my website, jakehertzog.com, and this record will be available on all the major streaming services and download services in a few weeks. I'm doing some limited touring in different capacities. I'll be touring in Argentina next month with a great guitar player, Juanpi Juarez, who I've been lucky to collaborate with in the past, and then sort of just various shows around Arkansas as I work in my academic life, and we work on our summer programs and that type of thing. The concerto project is mostly finished on paper, but we hope it lives a long life, and we're working on plans to present the same music in Japan next year. Also, the record will be out probably in the second quarter of 2025. Later this year, I'll be doing a project of Ozark folk music adapted for jazz trio, which I'm really excited about because I've lived in Arkansas almost 7 years now, and I've just come into contact with so many incredible musicians and folklorists and people who truly come from a different musical place than I do. So this is my chance to get really deep with that. And I'm going to be interviewing people and figuring out like how far back can I find these songs? And then I'm also doing a research project where we're studying the way that collegiate jazz programs impact various jazz scenes, mostly in sort of mid-sized cities. So we just completed a long visit to Kansas City as one of our case studies, and we have a few more coming up in Atlanta and Portland in the next year and a half. So part of my life will be doing interviews and writing papers as well for the next year.
You definitely won't get bored. There's enough to do. But that's really cool. And what I actually love, what you said, that this focus on regional jazz scenes. We often lose that perspective and focus that jazz just doesn't just live in New York City or, New Orleans or some places. Every area has a very, very special scene. And traditionally, we had very unique scenes. I got to study the Indianapolis scene quite a bit, where you had Freddie Hubbard and Wes Montgomery and J.J. Johnson, David Baker be there at the same time, and something was in the air, right? To figure that out. So really cool stuff. We should point out that your last name, in contrast to mine, has a T in it. So it's Jake,
right.
Hertzog. I assume .com, right?
Yep.
To find more info. And we get to the arrival. Give us the last glimpse of what we can expect now.
Musically speaking, I can't help myself with the rock influence, so this one has some of that. This was sort of one of those where I wanted to make a very celebratory song and also feature Matt a little bit, and continuing in the metaphor, the main body of the soloing is in odd meter, because any new parent will sort of attest to feeling joy and also feeling like, oh, what is this? And oh, what is this? And oh, what is this? And so this song is a little bit of a tribute to that mixture of joy and terror and excitement and oh my goodness and all the things that parenting an infant it brings you. So this song is about that. And again, I certainly want to say that I'm very grateful for the chance to speak about this, but both about music and what we've gone through, and certainly to I hope that any folks listening, experiencing anything similar will certainly, if not hopefully, find success, and at least hopefully find peace in the journey and healing in the journey, and ways to express what it has been like for them.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing it in music too. So congratulations on that new album. We're going to listen to Arrival. This album is called Longing to Meet You. And my guest today was Jake Hertzog, who you heard on composition and guitar. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much. What an absolute treat to be.
Thank you for listening to Talking Jazz. My guest today was composer, guitarist, educator, Jake Hertzog. You can hear Talking Jazz every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Mondays at 7 p.m. on WETF 105.7 in South Bend, Indiana, or online at jazzradiowetf.org, and Fridays at 8 p.m. on WICR 88.7 Indianapolis. Previous shows are also on my YouTube channel, Monika Herzig, MonikaHerzig. Please subscribe to the Talking Jazz playlist. Thank you for listening.